Hey Computer, play About Bees podcast.
Okay, hi everybody. We're back. It's Ron, Miksha, and
Bidzina.
Bidzina, what's your last name?
Bidzina Mosiashvili. I thought I would just keep it at Bidzina.
Yeah, you can, but or we can, but you've got a last name, so
Okay.
and it's even up on the screen for people. Right. It's in our log notes on the podcast. We want everybody to know who you are because you're going places, and it's good for
Fingers
that name
crossed.
to be out there. No, you're doing it. You're doing it, man. Okay, so our podcast about bees, culture, and curiosity. And today we're going to be focusing on what happens to ordinary honeybees when robbing gets out of hand. Like the bees rob each other. A lot of people didn't realize that, but they can go pretty berserk working over each other. And have you ever had robbing in any of your bees?
I have a really funny story to tell about that.
Okay, go.
Okay, all right. Well, last year I had bees in my backyard for the first time, and I didn't tell my neighbors, and I don't live in my backyard isn't very big, so everyone can see behind it. So we have an alleyway, and I put it furthest away from me and closest to everyone.
Oh, that's really kind.
Well, I just put it like furthest. I put it closest to the alley.
Yeah.
Away from my neighbors, away from my door, just wherever it was. But anyways, then I decided to go to Portugal.
Okay.
For a month.
Okay.
And I put my friend in charge of the bees, and it was his first year of beekeeping. It was actually his bees. We just were putting them in my backyard. So he was in charge of taking care of them. I go to Portugal for a month. I come back. It's August now, in the dead heat of summer, and I'm doing honey harvesting in my backyard out of a 4-deep box.
Ooh.
Full of bees.
Yeah.
And they're flying everywhere. My neighbors are getting angry. They're accusing me of they're getting stung, and I'm not getting stung because I'm in the middle of this swarm without a suit collecting honey. So it was a robbing fest because my neighbor, also some other faraway neighbor, also has beehives, and their hive was coming to my backyard. So the cops ended up getting called, and they got. Oh yeah,
this is getting worse and worse.
Yeah, so they came, and then.
And the cops get stung.
The bylaw. Well, at that point, I was planning to move the bees out, so they were already moved out by the time they came to a proper location now. So there was no more bees in my backyard, but it was a bylaw officer. He wanted to see. No, sorry, actually, it was this with the Calgary. It was a city officer.
Yeah.
And he came in. He's like, he wanted to see where I had them. I took them to the backyard, and he saw all my jars of honey stacked up in my back porch. And he's like, oh, well, what are you doing there? And he's like, I told him I'm harvesting honey and processing it. And then there was a big fit. They got the Alberta Health certified, and they're like, you're not allowed to do this. I'm like, what do you mean? This is what everybody does. And he's like, well, do you want to give me a list of all of them and start snitching on them? And I'm like,
oh, man.
yeah, I know. And so they shut down my honey operation. But yeah, so I can't do it at my house. I can do it anywhere unless I get a Alberta Health certified kitchen built in my house, and I can't use my personal kitchen. It has to be a second kitchen.
Okay, now wait a minute. Now
that's not used for personal.
That's not the law. That's not real.
I don't know. This is what they kind of threw the book at me.
Yeah,
but,
okay. But that's not true for us in Alberta.
Yeah,
if
exactly.
You're
that's
producing
right.
your own honey and not selling it in a store.
Yes.
You can be pretty filthy. I mean, you could be in your bare feet and stomping the combs to get the honey out, just like you would with the grapes back in your old country of Georgia.
Oh yes, and let me tell you, I don't have the proper, but I tried my best to keep it. I've helped some beekeepers. I don't want to name names.
No, don't.
No, I won't. And
go ahead. Tell me
no. But you know exactly what you just said. It's because the common phrase is honey is sterile.
Right.
Honey is sterile, and it's
well,
okay.
Germs can't live in honey. It doesn't mean it's sterile. I mean, you can have all kinds of stuff in it that's not good for you.
Yeah, exactly.
But bacteria cannot live in honey. for a number of reasons. We know that's true. Well, that's too bad. That's quite the story. And you still live in the same place?
I still live at the same place. No more bees, except who knows? I'm planning to this time do it. But the officer said I could do it. I just have to make an announcement and get a livestock permit.
Yeah, you do need that. You need the permit from the city.
Yes. Because then they can revoke it if I do
this again.
Yeah. If I do some issues with the neighbors. Whatever.
Yeah.
But they said he doesn't want to. He's just being nice. He's curious, actually.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm actually very curious. I didn't know bees existed in Alberta, but yeah, that's right. That's not too many people know this. Everybody.
Wow.
Yeah. So now it's kind of going on, but. Robbing is apparently it's really frowned upon in the beekeeping world.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
But all of us, including me, everybody I know, has had some robbing incident going on one time or another. And it's sometimes really hard to get things back under control. One of the easiest ways
you just have to let them be, kind of.
No. There is a trick.
Okay, there's a trick.
There's a trick that so.
Wait, should we explain what robbing is? I guess
well, we're going to let Tolstoy explain what robbing is, because Tolstoy actually in his book War and Peace, he goes into that in quite a lot of detail. We'll get to that in a few minutes, but first I thought what would be kind of fun is just before making today's podcast, I was poking around a little bit on the internet to see what's going on in the world of bees and what kind of things are happening everywhere else. And I found 3 little stories I'd like your comments on because I found them so interesting. So excuse me while I try to read this here.
So, sorry, we're going to go back to the robbing stuff, right?
Oh, yeah, we are.
Okay.
Yeah, we are. We're going to leave people hanging they don't give up. No, don't go away. They want to know how to control robbing. We've got tricks for that. They want to know what the definition of robbing is. We're going to ask Lev Tolstoy for his definition. And, Tolstoy, the guy that wrote War and Peace, and Anna Karenina, and a whole bunch of other stuff. We'll talk about him today. That's really our main focus today. But we've got so much else, and we get sidetracked. And I think that's our specialty, is just running off in different directions.
I hope the audience doesn't. Yeah, exactly. There will be a lot of sidetrack.
That. People love that. People, the ones who keep listening.
Right, because if you just listen for that one snippet, it doesn't make any sense. But if you continue the conversation,
Yeah. So this is from Euronews, which is a news agency in, of all places, Europe. And they made the announcement yesterday. It's not really an announcement. It's more like a little fun article that they published. And it says that Ukraine is one of the main producers of honey in Europe. Now, did you know that one of the biggest places that honey comes out of in Europe is in the Ukraine?
I know they had a big beekeeping industry there. I didn't know they were the main exporters of honey.
Yeah, they're one of the main producers of honey in Europe, and I suppose that means also exporters because it's a good cash crop, and certainly their economy needs all the help it can get right now to survive and rebuild. In the Ukraine, canola, which we have here, it's the stuff that goes into making canola oil seed that people cook with. It has a yellow flower and makes a white honey. They produce a lot of that. And then in the more hilly areas of Ukraine, they produce quite a lot from a tree that in North America we call black locust, but in Europe they call it acacia.
Acacia.
And it's kind of like it's a false acacia. It's not really in the acacia family, but it's a tree that produces a really nice white, very sweet, high fructose honey, and it's very popular. And they produce millions of pounds of that. So anyhow,
the article that you're reading it's Ukrainians keeping wild beekeeping tradition alive. Is it a recent one or May 2020?
Yeah, it's about. I think they published it because of May 20th. It was International World Bee Day.
On 2021, 3 years ago, right?
Oh, okay.
Or is this a recent article?
No, well, this might have been a republication of the same old article, but it probably has the same information. So one of the things I found fascinating in this article is the fact that 1 in every 60 people in Ukraine are beekeepers.
Right. So 1.5% of Ukraine's population.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1.5% of the people
Wow.
in Ukraine. That's about 1 in 60 people.
So for Canada, if you put that in perspective for Canada, that would be about, it would be
Well, I can tell you,
500,000 people or 1 million people? Or?
I can tell you for Alberta, I don't remember the numbers for Canada exactly, but Alberta itself has more bees than any of the other provinces in all of Canada, and we are in Alberta.
Right.
Bidzina and I are speaking to you from Alberta, and here in Alberta, we have about 1,800 beekeepers. Only 200 or 300 of those are big commercial beekeepers. The rest are hobbyists. But we've got 1,800 people that keep bees in one way or another. It's 1,800 beekeepers, and we have about 5 million, close to 5 million people living here in the province.
Okay, it's I just want to get exact number. It's 4.3 million is our population in Alberta.
Okay. And what's the date on that? 4.3 million.
It's the most recent, 2019.
Oh,
so
no.
you're right.
So I think we're close to 5 million
Probably
people.
close to 5 million.
But why don't we say about 4.8 million?
Okay.
Because that works out with the numbers. If we have about, I said 1,800 beekeepers, it's more like 1,600 beekeepers are in Alberta.
Right.
So that means we have one beekeeper for every 3,000 people living in
Yes.
Alberta. That's very few.
That's very few.
Yeah. So it's not like compared to Europe, compared to the Ukraine, where it's 1 in 60 people, and here it's 1 in 3,000 people in Alberta keep bees.
Yeah, 1.5% of 4.8 million is about 72,000 people.
Yes.
So
okay.
we're going from 1,800 to 72,000.
Yeah.
Which is that's the gap that we need to fill.
Oh, we don't need to. We don't need to. We don't need to have everybody and their brother keeping bees. That's not necessary. Anyhow, I found that to be a really interesting article, but the really key part of the article is they talk about the way that the bees are being kept. And they interview somebody, Maxim Bortnik.
Okay, yeah.
And so he was a honey hunter. Have you ever hunted for bees?
No, but I've caught one swarm.
Okay.
From my own hive. But I've attempted to, they do the swarm calls at the beekeeping group.
Yeah, right.
I've attempted to, get one. I've never been able to secure.
Yeah, you're not high enough up.
I'm not high enough.
Yeah. Well, hang in there. Beekeepers are always quitting, and then
it's hard,
then
anyways. Yeah,
and especially the demographics we have for beekeepers, they're either quitting or dying, because most of them are around my age, and so we have a kind of a limited shelf life now. And
1,800, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
it's not
that's
too
right.
many of.
No, so you'll move up on that list. That's good.
Just gotta hang on.
Hang on, you'll be the one that catches all the swarms before you know it. So this person is hunting for bees, but then it says here that they've gone back to an old tradition of taking logs and hollowing them out and setting them up out in a forest somewhere and letting the bees come into it as a natural home, and it kind of says here that some bee experts say that traditional beekeeping, which is what I just described.
Is it kind of like this?
Yes, very much. So what we're looking at here, Bidzina brought up on his computer, is a picture of a log with all of these combs hanging down inside of it. It's just gorgeous. So yeah, it's kind of like that. That's traditional beekeeping, and that's something I've never done either. But I think it's really funny that when I was a kid, which was quite a few years ago, I was still, for a few years, I worked as an apiary inspector when I was about 20 years old. And I'd go to people's yards and look at their bees, look for disease, but also I'd help them move their bees out of some of those traditional kinds of logs and stuff and put them into modern hives, because that's what the experts said. You don't keep bees in logs. It's not good for them. It's not good for you. So let's move them into new equipment. And now here we've got a story where the experts are saying the bees live better in the traditional hives.
Right. And sorry, the thought process kind of behind why the experts are saying that is because they want you to inspect every single frame. Every frame of bees has to be inspectable.
Yeah.
So if we put them in a log, that's not possible without destroying.
Or a straw skep or something like that. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So, but what they found is that you're saying that it's better for the bees.
It might be.
Yeah. Even though you might be destroying some of their home to inspect them once in a while, it's still better for them overall, or
It's probably better that we don't inspect them.
it's probably better to not inspect them.
Yeah. I guess, although they still die in the wild just as they do when people manage them. Anyhow, I found that to be an interesting story, and we're actually going to circle back to that with Tolstoy in a little bit because of the type of beehives that Tolstoy used and the kind of bees. So in Ukraine, I can't remember, but I think Tolstoy's homestead was south of Moscow, about a couple hundred kilometers, maybe 100 kilometers, 200 kilometers, which puts him about maybe probably more than 500, maybe 1,000 kilometers away from the Ukraine. But same kind of typical geography in the area, kind of same latitudes, the same length of winters and that sort of thing. So he had, Tolstoy had learned a lot from Ukrainian beekeepers too.
I see.
And we're going to come to that in just a little bit. That'll be one of the things coming up. Another story.
To finish it up, so Maxim, honey hunter, Bortnik, makes new. This is from the article. Makes new hives by hollowing out logs. He then carefully chooses the tree where to position the hive so it's protected from the winds to ensure bees inside can survive the cold Ukrainian winters. And then this is him being quoted now. I have left some smell of old bee colony there, Bortnik said. I used old beeswax for it. Hopefully the bees will feel it and will come to live in this beehive. But experts say traditional beekeeping, where a colony can be better controlled and monitored, is vital. 2 years ago, it was noted that bee populations were declining due to the use of pesticides, habitat destruction, climate change, and then it goes on about bees dying again.
Yeah.
But I saw some there where it said something about smell, and I'm like, oh, maybe the bees from the log smell better. But no, he left some of the old smell of the bee colony there so they would live in it.
Yeah.
But
I've heard this too. I don't do very much trapping. I've tried it when I was much younger, like putting out a box during swarm season.
Okay, he's trapping.
Yeah, and that makes a nice home for the bees. And I did find, and also read, I probably wasn't that observant that I actually could tell in my own experiment, but what I read was that the bees do like the smell of an older box. It's been used before by other bees. It just makes them feel like, okay, other people lived in here, so maybe we can too.
They always sit nicer too because they've propolized it.
Yeah.
And it depends if it's like all lumpy and stuff. But if you scrape it off nice, they always the used boxes tend to stick better.
Yeah. Anyway, that's the story out of the Ukraine, and this is a really fun story here. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but there's a guy named David Beckham, and what was he?
He is a soccer player.
He's just, I thought he was like a Mr. Spice Girl.
He's a football player.
Is he married to one of the Spice Girls?
He's married to like Victoria Beckham.
Not Ginger Spice or Rosemary and Thyme Spice. No.
Why is she famous? I think she was one of the.
Yeah, she was a girl, a Spice Girl,
she was
a singer.
Spice Girl, yeah.
Yeah, they had a great little band there for a while. And anyhow, that's his wife. But David Beckham, according to this story in Sky News, which is out of England, the headline, I'm going to read the headline because I think that it's priceless.
Okay.
David Beckham swaps beekeeping tips with the king as he becomes ambassador of the monarch's charity. Now, the king being, of course, King Charles, and King Charles, of course, being a beekeeper. And the story goes on to say that that he was really proud and happy to be able to help the charity that the king runs. It's a charity that helps kids experience the outdoors a little bit more, and especially troubled children, that help get their lives together. So David Beckham, I think that's a great thing for him to be doing. He's a supporter of the King's Foundation, and he said that while the King's work was, quote, inspiring, he also said that it was great to compare beekeeping tips with the monarch. So David Beckham, the guy who made a living kicking a little white ball around on a field, right?
Yes, and yeah.
And
I'm not familiar with football either, to be honest with you. I don't know why he's so also. I think he's just British and he's English, and they kind of.
Oh no, he was like the greatest soccer player.
He was a good
ever.
soccer player.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
all
he
right.
was good. He was good, really good.
Paid
He's
for, like, LA
I think
Galaxy.
He's at like 50 years old now, so
Yeah.
So he's got other things to do with his name and with his energy, and that's really, really good. But it's just really cool that I like helping the kids. But you know what was really fun? I got to hang out with King Charles and talk about bees. Those are the words coming out of David Beckham, because David Beckham's also a beekeeper. Okay, that's enough on that story.
I have a picture of them up here.
Okay.
It's the article.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They look like they're enjoying themselves, don't they?
Well, anybody that I take beekeeping on, like I call a beekeeping field trip, and anytime they come, they always have fun.
Yeah.
There's not
Yeah.
a moment where they're like, this is not enjoyable.
Oh, wow. You got to talk to those neighbors that watched you
Yeah.
get robbed out.
They did not like that, actually. Right?
And here's our last story here before we get going into the main theme of the day. WBUR Boston Radio. You're listening to WBUR here in Boston. What's the buzz? A primer. What's the buzz? I like that. That's the headline. What's the buzz? It's like somebody thought, hey, I'm going to be really clever, and I'm going to come up with a few little quirky sayings that kind of use the beekeeping, So what's the buzz? And this is about Boston's new beekeeping rules. For $25, you can now register your colony of bees in the city of Boston. In the past, it was illegal to keep bees in Boston because they were defined as a livestock, and livestock wasn't allowed to be kept in Boston except under certain places and conditions, and those included places where people already were allowed to keep livestock in Boston. And there were a few places that were kind of grandfathered in from the very old days, and that was like some of the ethnic districts. They have a Chinatown, as they call it, in Boston, and they're allowed to have small butcher shops,
Okay.
and bring in the cattle and sheep or hogs or whatever it was, right into the town.
Right.
And that's livestock. And because livestock was legal in that district, then the people living in the district could also keep bees. But nowhere else in the city, except in a few designated areas. Now it's the whole city. So the whole city is going to suddenly have thousands and thousands of colonies of honeybees. Good idea or bad idea?
I think it's a good idea, but it needs to be managed properly.
Mm-hmm.
And who's going to manage it?
Yeah, I know, because you can always get these people who don't register their hives and then get robbing going in their backyard, and before you know it, the police are called.
That's right. That's right. And all I had to do is just kind of inform my neighbors of what was going on. But I thought it was only temporary. It was a temporary location.
Yeah.
And I didn't think they would
and
get
you were
so
gone, right? You
I
were
was gone, and they got so big, and both of the honey boxes that we had put. There was 2 brood boxes, and 2 empty honey boxes were filled with honey when I had returned, filled, I couldn't pick them up.
Wow.
And we had to put a 3rd one, and they were already filling that up before I was doing a honey harvest.
Yeah.
And so they were a monster. We actually named it Aggro Hive.
Yeah.
I just give them numbers.
Uh-huh.
They're number 1, number 2. Well, it was my friend's house, and he named it Aggro Hive. And because they were so aggressive.
Oh, okay.
And but we split them. I've heard that you have to split your aggressive hives. Yeah, so if you're managing them properly and you have an aggressive hive, you don't have to euthanize. I mean, that you can take that measure if you like, but well, you really just got to split them up and just keep splitting them, and then just sell your splits or do whatever you want with them until they're kind of, you get the one queen that is calm.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what I've been told.
Who told you that story?
Well, it wasn't really, it was more of like information that I've gathered and kind of my own personal way going about it, because I don't want to kill them, even if they're aggressive,
right?
Because they're aggressive for a reason. They're trying to protect themselves or whatever. They're just, something happened, but like I've noticed that they will change. So sometimes it'll be good weather. So I don't want to kill them because it was one bad experience.
I know.
But
and I'm teasing you obviously about these things happen. They happen to everybody. And it's a learning experience, and nobody got seriously injured in your neighborhood.
Nobody. I don't think anybody got stung for that matter.
Okay.
Because they would then really have a fit.
Yeah.
They were just trying to. And then this year, one of my rose bushes got cut up, and I thought my neighbors were having payback on me for having bees in the backyard, and I find out that it was one of the neighborhood kids. He was just
kids
plain stupid.
Kids are like that. They're the ones who really, you should put a beehive out just for them. I
do want to do that because it's actually maybe in my front yard.
Yeah, well,
it would be better because it would be more controlled and it would be away from everyone, and the bees would fly down. Like they wouldn't fly into it; they would come down away from everyone.
Well, the Calgary City Ordinance, and that's where we are in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, our ordinance is that we can't put bees in the front yard.
Oh, no bees in the front yard.
Even if that's the least trafficked and safest place for the bees, no bees in the front yard, unfortunately. They won't allow that. So when you file for your permit, you have to send in a picture where the bees are going to be. They may come back and inspect to make sure that's where they are. No, I was thinking something much more devious about the bees for the neighborhood kids. I mean, you just put a beehive out there and wait till they poke at it.
Oh,
yeah. So they can learn a lesson.
Yeah.
I had that happen once. I was keeping bees in northern Saskatchewan, and one of my apiaries, I came in and I found a couple of lids off. And I put rocks on the lids to, so the wind can't blow the lids off these colonies.
Right.
And I talked to the farmer there, and he goes, "Yeah." He said, "I'm so sorry." He said, "My son decided he was going to show some of his friends one evening. They went out there a couple days ago, and he pulled off a lid just to show how brave he was. And he started to pull out a comb, and then he got covered in bees, and he came running back to the house with his friends following him." And of course, nobody ever went back to clean up for it.
Right.
So that's how they learned to leave bees alone.
Yeah. Bears will have similar experience.
Yeah.
Well, you need to have electric fan.
Yeah, they will. They can be discouraged, but they can't really be taught once they taste the honey and the brood.
Honey, right.
They love the brood.
Yeah, they go for a lot of people think they go for the honey, but they're actually going out for the eggs.
That's right. The brood. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They sure are. That's exactly right. Okay, so here's Boston. So certain restrictions on keeping your bees in an urban environment, limited to 5 colonies. What do you think? Too many? Too few?
In one area?
One backyard.
Yeah, that's a lot. They're giving them a lot of leeway there.
I agree. That is a lot. I do know people in the city of Calgary who have 7 or 8 hives in the backyard, but they had them there before the law came in that allows us in Calgary to have 2 hives in the backyard. So we have a 2-hive limit.
Oh, so if you have them before the law came in, it's allowed?
Yeah. You just have to ask. I mean, you got to get their approval and make the claim. But yeah, they're not.
Neighbors have to agree or whatever.
No, actually, here in Calgary, you don't have to talk to your neighbors.
Yeah, that's actually what the bylaw officer said too. Yeah.
Yeah, you do not have to talk to any neighbor. You just do what you want to.
Yeah. Which
is really good. Because you're always within a certain distance, you're always going to find someone who's dreadfully afraid of the bees.
Well, yeah, that's exactly. I know which neighbor it is. Mm-hmm. It's not the bees that she's only complained about.
Well, be careful because she's probably listening to us right now. Okay. Also in Boston, they can't be in your front yard, and they there's rules around, several rules around how close they can be to the property line. So I guess that varies depending on, if your property line is on a walkway or if your property line is on, a hedge, or
Right.
if it's just an open field, into a playground, and then there are probably different rules. But here's a rule that I don't understand that Boston has, and it's that hives cannot be more than 6 feet tall or 24 cubic feet. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that's a stupid law, because here, if you limit your hives to 6 feet, they're probably going to swarm and cause more mischief than if you give them extra space to keep them home.
Yes.
So I don't know why they went with no taller than 6 feet. I don't know.
Maybe that they're trying to I guess that's their way of
Being mean?
no, not being mean, but they're like, we don't want the hives to get too big. They don't really understand. Like whoever drafted up this law, they're like, they're looking at it as like a chicken coop. They're like, you can't have a bigger chicken coop than 10 feet.
Good point.
It's like a shed
point.
kind of rule. Or,
I think you're right. I think that's what they didn't know any better, and they thought,
but wouldn't they consult with beekeepers before
they have to.
Yeah, they have to. So that is
Anyway.
interesting why they would make it like maybe they are being mean.
And the article ends with this here: not ready for a hive? Oh well, but you still want to help the bees, don't you? How do you help bees by keeping bees?
You plant nice flowers.
Yeah. So then there's a link, and it says top 15 tips for helping pollinators. So the 15 tips are interesting. I'm not going to read them now because I want to get on to our main theme here. But they're basically telling you what kind of plants to plant and what to do there about them. And it even ends here. One of the tips that they talk about is that you're not necessarily going to be helping the bees by keeping. You're not going to be helping the environment, especially by keeping honeybees. They write in this in this story that keeping bees to help the bees is like keeping chickens to help the birds, and there's a point to that. I really do believe there's a point to that. Anyhow, that's enough of that. We'll put the links to these stories into the notes for our podcast.
I was recording the whole thing and I was going through the articles while we were talking.
All right.
So I'll put it up on the screen for hopefully it will make sense and it won't be too all over the place. But
we're always all over the place. That's our main theme here. So why don't we get on to the story about Lev or Leo Tolstoy? Did you know who Tolstoy was before we thought about doing a piece on him?
No, I didn't.
Okay, that's fair enough. We just talked to somebody downstairs that sold us coffee, and he really didn't quite know who Tolstoy was either. So
They don't teach these things anymore in school. It's really odd.
I know. It really is odd. It's kind of sad. It's very sad.
It's like they think it's like old news, or I don't know what they're thinking, but it's just not.
So how about if I give a little bit on
Sure.
On Tolstoy? So we're going to talk about War and Peace Among the Hives. And War and Peace is this huge book of some 1,000 pages almost, written by a guy named Leo Tolstoy, who lived in Russia. And he was a contemporary of people like Abraham Lincoln and Charles Darwin. So he lived in that era, like the middle of the 19th century, somewhere around then. And I think Tolstoy himself was born in 1828, and he lived for about 80 years. So he lived right into about 1910. So that's his era. That's his time frame. And during that time frame, there are people like Tchaikovsky in Russia who were producing really great music. The 1812 Overture written by Tchaikovsky. And Tolstoy was the most famous writer in the world for a period of about 30 years. And he lived on an acreage. He lived on basically a farm that he turned more or less into a commune, and he was from an aristocratic family. He was very wealthy when he was young, very adventurous, and got into a lot of trouble. He had gambling debts that,
Right.
you know about that.
Well, yeah, I just did a little bit of I just watched a couple documentaries and
Yeah?
read about him. But yeah, very rebellious individual.
Tell me more.
So from what I understand, he wasn't very good in school. He flunked out.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I might be butchering the facts here. But his first attempt at university, his professors said he's either unwilling or not wanting to learn. Like he's not able or unwilling to learn.
Okay.
That's the words that they used to describe him. And there's a quote in his diary that I'm kind of just remembering now. He said his first day of class, his expectations were that every single word that came out of the professor's mouth should be profound. That's what
his expectations were pretty high then.
They
weren't
were very high. He said something to the beginning to the end, everything the professor should say should be profound. And he said, I walked in and it was nothing like that. He said, I was so bored while everybody was taking notes, I was drawing figurines. And every so once in a while, I would move my hand to pretend I was writing.
Wow.
So he hated school.
What a loser. He'll never amount to anything.
Well, I don't know, because he was a troubled individual because he had a lot of issues growing up and he was just like
his parents died when he was really young.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like just a constant kind of his book War and Peace, kind of chaos and peace in his life that his theme and then kind of like what's the word when Christians or Catholics they
repent,
but they kind of punish themselves.
Oh yeah.
He would go through series of that.
Yeah.
Like he would do bad and then he would feel really bad and guilty. So then he would do like a series of atonements. Which were kind of brutal and unnecessary.
Yeah.
And maybe kind of maybe speaking to his wife, kind of what the later conflicts that he had with his wife that we'll be talking about here. But that's kind of a little bit snippet of.
No, that's
he's
good.
a little rebellious individual.
Yeah, and he looked kind of rebellious, didn't he?
I mean, if you look at his young picture here, I'll put on my laptop here.
Oh, I have a couple.
You have a young pictures?
Yeah,
Okay.
I do.
Okay.
So we'll get to that. But this is the guy we're talking about. This is middle age, and when he became really famous for writing a couple of super huge books. And he had a lot going on in his life that, once he settled down, he still continued to be very unorthodox. He was a soldier when he was young, but he saw somebody being executed for political reasons in France at a guillotine, and he made up his mind that he would always fight against the governments that would try to impose their regulations on ordinary people. And that was really a big theme in his life. Not so much in his stories or his books.
Yeah, a word that they used to describe him in the documentaries is a professional troublemaker.
Okay.
So he was causing chaos, but at a professional level.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the things we're going to get into here really shortly is that he became a beekeeper. So he was this ultra-wealthy, unorthodox landowner who was a pacifist. He was a friend of Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, when Gandhi was first starting out. So Gandhi was born in India. He became known for using nonviolence to free or make India independent from the British through nonviolent means. But when Gandhi was young, he lived in South Africa, and which was also a British colony at the time, just like India was. And he was a lawyer there. And he was trying to organize people of color within the societies of South Africa to have more liberties. And then he was arrested several times. But Gandhi put up a commune with the help of Tolstoy, and Tolstoy gave him money and help for that. And they became pen pals. They wrote back and forth a few times, and Gandhi was really encouraged by Tolstoy to use entirely nonviolent methods to free India from England. And Tolstoy also, he really believed so strongly in nonviolence that when there's a religious group called the Doukhobors that were in southern Russia, very close to where Tolstoy lived. And this was a breakaway religious sect where the people rejected all forms of organized religion. So no more priests. And this is a very strongly Russian Orthodox area. So he's totally against the organized church. The Doukhobors were. And by then, Tolstoy was already excommunicated from his own church for being too liberal of a thinker. And the Doukhobors were being forced to go into the army. And they believed that no one should serve in any army. And these people, of which there were maybe 50,000 or so, were being persecuted by the czars, the government of Russia. And they came to Tolstoy and they said, "We need your help." And Tolstoy paid for several thousand of them to move to Canada. So they settled in British Columbia. So the Doukhobors came to British Columbia and set up a colony. And today I think there are about 40,000 people.
Wow.
But there's still people back in
Russia.
In Russia that are still Doukhobors too. So anyhow, that's kind of his way of thinking, his life, the things that Tolstoy was really interested in and trying to work a lot on. But I want to get back to the bees. And so he was so interested in everything that the honeybees were one of the things that he wanted to know more about. And at one point in his youngish life, his middle-aged life, his wife made the comment that she was afraid that they were going to go broke because he quit writing and he just sat in front of the beehives day after day, kind of just watching them. He was so infatuated. He was just like he couldn't get away from wanting to know more about bees, keeping bees, working with the bees. So he was this fantastic beekeeper. And one of the reasons that we wanted to talk about him today was because in the book War and Peace, he talks about robbing. And
right.
And I have
back to robbing.
So what is robbing? Robbing is where a weak colony of bees is often attacked by a strong colony of bees with the intention on the part of the strong colony of bees of stealing the honey that's in the weaker hive. And
just to put an asterisk, robbing behavior can also happen if you leave open honey out, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep. So anything, even sugar syrup,
yes.
like if you're feeding bees and you spill the syrup and it's a time of the year when there isn't much in blossom, then
no honey flow,
then the bees are looking at that sugar syrup and they go after it. So for those who are watching on YouTube, we're showing a little clip from my own backyard a few years ago when I had made a small nuke. A nuke is just a small colony of bees. It only has maybe 2,000 or 3,000 bees in it instead of 30,000 or 40,000 bees. And I just noticed that this nuke was being attacked by other bees. And they would sting and kill the other bees in the hive. And they would try to sneak in and steal the honey from the weak hive of bees.
So this was both of them are your hives?
Yes. Okay. Well, I don't know who was stealing, but the weak hive, the one being robbed, was mine. Yeah. So what I tried to do is reduce the size of the entrances everywhere. There was a little hole in the wood. I covered that up with duct tape. And the main entrance, I just plugged it with screen for a while so that no bees could come and go at all, just to keep those robbers out. And they still kept coming. Like they would fly close to it and they would just hit it really hard. And they would just be trying to get in.
So aggressive.
And they're really mean and aggressive. And so what I finally did, and this is some advice that I think everybody could use, if they have a problem with robbing around their garage when they're processing honey or in the backyard, is get a garden hose. I put a garden hose on top of this little tiny colony of bees and turned the hose on, and the water sprayed out And within about half an hour, there was no more robbing because the bees didn't want to go through the water. Everything was getting wet. The hive was getting wet. The grass was getting wet. And
when it's robbing, it's super hot. So
usually it is.
Yeah. So
yeah.
this is okay. Like you can
Right.
drench the hive in
Oh, yeah,
water.
yeah. The
It's
outside
like
of the hive, anytime. You
Yeah.
can drench it with
Yeah.
water, or like we do here in the winter, we drench it with snow.
Yeah, exactly. Rain
but-
and snow. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyhow, this is the problem. And Leo Tolstoy recognized it as a big problem too. So he wrote in
Check the camera. Keep going.
in the book War and Peace, he wrote about a beehive that was being robbed out, and he used that to kind of definitely symbolize the city of Moscow. So this is him as a young, Rafe young man. He was, I don't know, I wouldn't call him charming. He looked kind of self-centered there in that photograph. But this was about his age. He was in his 30s, 40s when he was keeping bees and trying to really understand them and dig deeply into them and learn about things like robbing and so on. And he did it to such an extent that his wife was seriously worried about him. So what was beekeeping like for him in those days? He learned a lot about beekeeping from some time that he had spent in the Ukraine. There's a beekeeper in the Ukraine called, get the name right, Petro Prokopovich. So Petro Prokopovich was a beekeeper in the Ukraine who was born in the 1700s and died in 1850 when Tolstoy was a young man. And the thing about this guy was even before Langstroth in North America came up with frames in the hives, this fellow already had frames in his hives. This gentleman in the Ukraine, in passing away in the year 1850, so during the 1830s, 1840s, do you want to take a guess at how many colonies of bees he might have owned at that time?
Tolstoy?
No, not Tolstoy. No, this is Petro.
Oh, this is Petro.
Prokopovich. So he had this.
Okay, I'll guess here. I'm gonna take a good guess here since it's probably gonna be a big number.
Yeah, it's
but
a
let's
big
say
number.
10,000, 15,000.
Whoa, yeah. You're pretty close, pretty darn close. I would have never guessed that for that long ago because, the big commercial beekeepers of today are huge beekeepers. And
Mechanized, pretty much.
Yeah,
right,
mechanized. He had 6,600 hives at the time of his death. And
It's a lot.
That's a lot of bees, And the type of beehive that he used was very similar to ours, where the honey went on the top and could be collected from the top of the hive, and the brood chambers were near the bottom. So it was a very modern system of keeping bees, and he could remove combs to take the honey off. And remember that Langstroth is famous for inventing the frame, the movable hive, the movable combs. Well, in parts of Europe, they already were using different styles like that. And I think, if I remember right, it was around 1856 or so when Langstroth, the American, invented the movable hive. So Langstroth was brilliant. Like he really revolutionized beekeeping in North America. But this guy already had hives like this, which would have been very much like the colonies of bees that Tolstoy started out with when he was a young man.
And just in the picture there, it looks like he's taking the frames out from the side, like a drawer, instead of from the top, where the long straw.
Yep. But from the top box, like he's got about 3 or 4 boxes there. And
only the top box.
Yeah, for the honey.
For the honey, right. Because the rest of it only needs to be
brood.
Yeah, because if they're laying eggs, why do you need to check?
Yeah.
Right.
That was the theory then, I suppose, and it was in the days before American foul brood was
disease
was around. Certainly no mites to worry about. So this guy was the world's first really big beekeeper, and Tolstoy then used colonies like this for his studies on his own estate, and he wrote in War and Peace there's several pages about the bees, and I'm going to try to read part of this, but interrupt me whenever we want to go into any detail on any of this. But here's how this chapter 20 starts for in the book War and Peace. So Tolstoy writing, "Meanwhile, Moscow was empty. There were still people in it. Perhaps a 50th part of its former inhabitants had remained, but it was empty. It was empty in the sense that a dying, queenless hive is empty." Okay, now for me, this is amazing that he wants to describe Moscow as a dying, empty city using symbolism that you would think he uses because everybody knows what a dying colony of bees is like, so obviously they're going to know what Moscow must have been like. And to me, that's such a leap to assume. So he was so deep into the bees that he probably thought that, well, everybody knows what it's like when a colony of bees is queenless and dying. So because he says Moscow was like a dying colony of bees. It'd be like, I felt really hot, like a person who had been running all day. Well, I'm describing being hot by terms that people are familiar with. So he's describing the city of Moscow being empty and at war and being devastated, just like a queenless colony of bees. And I guess since so many people kept bees in those days, I suppose they had, kind of common culture that they could associate what that might be like.
That could have been the case, but it could also been the case of a lot of beekeepers will assume many people know about bees. So you'll get a lot of many.
That's a good point.
Very like basic questions, and then beekeepers will kind of get frustrated with answering them, thinking they're like, "Why are you asking me this? It's so obvious."
Yeah.
But it's not that obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It probably was more obvious back in
then.
that day, 150 years ago, but I think you're right. I think that we tend to assume people know about things that it's called the curse of knowledge. It's when it's hard to explain something to somebody else because you know it so well that you can't imagine them not knowing it. And that may be, that's what you're describing, and that may be what's going on here.
Okay.
So,
But you think that he used that analogy because there was a way bigger community of bees? Like people would have understood that.
I think they would have understood it better than we would today, like than the ordinary person would today.
And honey was kind of more praised back then.
Oh, yeah.
Sweets weren't really sweets were it was a luxury item,
Right.
for the royals. So the only
Right.
sweets kind of the rest of the people got
Was honey.
was honey. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Africa and stuff, when they find honey, they go crazy, right? Like some of the tribes.
Everybody would.
Well, everybody would, but
Yeah.
it's like their form of. That's the sweetest thing that they've ever tasted. It's without getting it from the factory.
That's right. That's right. And actually, it would be for any of us. It's the sweetest, pure, natural food that any of us could
ever
taste.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Tolstoy, he writes about 3 pages describing this queenless beehive being robbed out. In a queenless hive, no life is left, though to a superficial glance, it seems as much alive as the other hives. So I've had people call me up and tell me that their bees are really doing well because they're so excited and they're flying so hard and they're just everywhere, but they're a little meaner or touchier today than I usually see them. Like they're just kind of jumpy everywhere. And then, you find out that their hive is dying and it's being robbed out, and they didn't realize that.
Right.
So to the casual, that's what he says, to a superficial glance. Now, I'm not going to read every word of the 3 pages, but I'll just kind of skip around here a little bit.
Because that's kind of what people were doing in Moscow. They were scurrying in and about.
Exactly.
Pillaging the place.
Pillaging the place,
It
yeah.
looked like it was active.
Yeah.
But really, if you looked at deep down, it was being robbed.
You got it.
Okay, I see.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, people would not get that one. I was.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's really right. Yeah. So he also writes that the bees do not fly in the same way. The small, No, I'm sorry. The word is smell. The smell. The smell and the sound that meet the beekeeper are not the same as before. To the beekeeper, a tap on the wall of a sick hive, the only reply when a beekeeper taps on the side of a sick hive.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
only a beekeeper would
Yeah.
know this analogy.
Yeah.
So yeah, beekeepers will tap on the side of their hive to get a sense of a little bit of just without checking on a cold day, or maybe they don't even want to look inside.
Yeah.
You'll give it a little tap, and if you hear a buzz, sometimes you'll hear a rumble.
Yeah.
Ooh, kind of a nice big buzz, then you know they're doing good.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if there's
Yeah.
no noise, then there's something
There's
else.
something wrong, yeah. Or if it's a really frenzied buzzing sound, there's something wrong. But if
Right.
it's a nice, calm,
Right.
steady,
Like woo.
yeah, like woo,
Yeah.
that's exactly right. My when I was a kid, my father, I learned beekeeping from my father and my older brothers, and I'd go out to the apiaries with my father when I was probably 12 years old or so, and I would be amazed that we would stop the truck, and he would climb out, and he'd go to each beehive, and he'd put his hand flat on the top, on the lid of the colony, and do it kind of not gently, but just kind of tapping it, just like boom, and go to the next one, boom, next one, boom. And each time he could tell me, without opening the hive, if it needs another box for honey, if the hive was queenless, and if the hive was doing really well or needed some extra attention. And then we'd open them up.
Because they all have different sounds.
Yeah, and different feel too.
Right, okay.
So like if the honey is right up to the cover of the hive, then it's a
Nice
solid tap, and otherwise it echoes a little bit, and then you think, okay, there's something it's not full, but the buzz sounds okay. Like so the colony is okay, but they're not filling the supers for some reason. Like he could tell all that. Just as when Tolstoy would tap on the side of a hive.
And sometimes beekeepers will use that stethoscope, that doctor's, that thing
Yeah.
with the doctors
Yeah,
put on.
stethoscope.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So it's, if you really want to, you could use that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, you could, and there's there are several companies now that are going that extra step and taking the cell phone and
Using the technology from that.
and having you can record the sound of the beehive.
Or put a recording device inside the beehive,
Not inside, just
Oh,
at the
okay.
entrance.
and then learn from
and
the sound.
from the sound
Tells you insight.
some of the same things that, and they're trying to refine it using artificial intelligence to really get, like, are there mites? Is there American foul brood?
Yeah, that
Is
was
it
actually
queenless?
a really good one way to,
Yeah.
sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's something.
Because animals like cows make noises when they're sick.
Mhm.
We don't know what bees' noises when they're sick, and there probably is a sick
There,
noise.
there probably is,
Yeah.
and there certainly are noises that are typical, not always,
Yeah.
but typical
Right.
for queenlessness or about to swarm or something else going on.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so there are outfits working on some of that. So when the beekeepers tap on the wall of the sick hive, the only reply is a disconnected buzzing from different parts of the deserted hive. From the lighting board, that's the entrance to the hive, instead of the former spiritus, fragrant smell of honey and venom. Well, I don't know if that's a fragrant smell when you smell venom. And the warm whiffs of the crowded life inside. Instead, there comes an odor of emptiness and decay, mingling with the smell of honey. So now he's describing that, things are not that great in paradise anymore. So this is Tolstoy again. So he's trying to describe what's happening to Moscow in terms of what happens to a beehive that's being invaded. There's no longer the measured, quiet sound of throbbing activity like the sound of boiling water, but instead there's the discordant sounds of disorder. In and out of the hive, long black robber bees smeared with honey fly shiftily. Formerly, only bees laden with honey were flying into the hive, and now these bees are flying out with honey. So he's making a lot of observations here So I guess he's not really expecting the reader to know that much about what it looks like for a robbing hive, but he's just trying to draw a parallel between, this natural event of a colony of bees that formerly had a big bustling population, and now it's been surrounded and attacked by Napoleon's forces during the war. And the Russians who lived inside of Moscow have mostly abandoned, and a lot of the ones who left behind are looting, stealing, and also the French soldiers are starting to come in too. So all this now.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll read a little bit more. I'm not going to, as I say, I'm not reading all 5,000 words of his essay about the robbing out hive of bees, but the beekeeper opens the upper part of a hive and examines the super. Now remember, he wrote this at a time when, supers were just invented. So this is very modern techniques. Like, he knows how bees are kept, like Tolstoy does. He certainly knew his beekeeping. But when the beekeeper opens up the hive now, it's neglected and foul. Black robber bees, not rubber bees, black robber bees are swiftly and stealthily prowling about on the combs, and the home bees, those would be the ones that lived there before everything fell apart, they are shriveled and listless as if they are old. They creep slowly about without even trying to hinder the robbers, having lost all motive and sense of life. Here and there, among the cells containing dead brood and honey, an angry buzzing can sometimes be heard. Here and there, a couple of bees, by force of habit and custom of cleaning out the brood cells, with efforts beyond their strength, laboriously drag away a dead bee without even knowing why they are doing it. The floor is littered with bits of wax, excrement, dying bees scarcely moving their legs, and dead ones that have not been cleared away yet. The beekeeper sees hundreds of dull, listless, and sleepy shells of bees. They have almost all died unawares, sitting in the sanctuary that they had once guarded, and which is now no more. They reek of decay and death. I love the way he describes the scent and just the nastiness of this dying beehive.
I guess he saw it as a perfect analogy to what was going on.
He sure did.
It kind of is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is. It really is. Only a few bees still move, rise, and feebly try to settle on the beekeeper's hand, lacking the spirit to die by stinging him. The rest are already dead and fall as lightly as fish scales to the bottom of the colony. So, in the same way, Moscow was empty when Napoleon, weary, uneasy, and morose, paced up and down in front of the rampart. So now Tolstoy goes back and leaves the bees out of the picture from this point on. And so he used that interlude just to bring an image that's unforgettable about what it would be like during war, during everything from famine to isolation to being attacked by an enemy, and a lot of people already have fled from Moscow. And there's Napoleon. So what did Napoleon win? Did he win anything more than those robber bees that were, kind of trying to clean out the hive? But do you ever notice too with robber bees, like it doesn't do them much good?
What do you mean by that?
Well, they tend to age much more quickly by becoming robber bees. They fight. Tolstoy, I think 3 different times, described these robber bees as black. And
so they're different. They develop into different type of bee.
They kind of do. They started out as regular foraging bees, but once they start robbing, with all the fighting activity and sneaking in and out of the hives, their hairs have begun to fall out. Either from
and that's why they look, because sometimes you'll find different colored bees.
Yeah.
You're like, what's going on here?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they don't have any hair.
No, and those are older and they're almost worn out.
And they can't get pollen.
Well,
They can't collect it as good.
Yeah, they wouldn't be able to collect it as well because I suppose that the hairs on their legs, where the corbicula would be also ruined. So yeah.
Huh.
Anyhow, that's all I've got on that. But I do want us to kind of look at Tolstoy a little bit more. So here he is near the end of his life, and it was near the end of his life that he invited the Doukhobors to come to Canada, or paid for their transit. So they were being horribly abused, mistreated, the Doukhobor religious group. And Bidzina, I did these photos on purpose, a certain reason for them. Believe it or not, when the Doukhobors were being disturbed from their area in southern Russia, they found refuge in the country of Georgia. And these two pictures are both from Georgia.
Yeah, that looked actually, I'm like, that looks a little familiar.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a house.
Similar style.
That's a house of worship. So they did have, they didn't believe in priests and a big structure to. Well, I shouldn't say they didn't. They still do not have that kind of. They believe that every individual has God living inside. That's what they teach, and we don't need to have other people interpreting what we should believe. It's from ourselves. So that really appealed to Tolstoy's philosophy as well. He believed the same way. But yeah, they had a colony in southern Georgia, and this picture of the so we're showing a picture here of a really ornate, beautiful church that might have been somebody's home, but that's where they held the.
So when Nicholas I succeeded Alexander as Tsar in 1826, he issued a decree intending forced assimilation of the Doukhobors through military conscription, prohibiting their meetings, encouraging conversions through established church. And then in 1830, another decree followed where all able-bodied members of the Doukhobors engaged in propaganda established should be conscripted and sent to the Russian army in the Caucasus, while those not capable of military service and their women and children should be resettled in the recently acquired Transcaucasian provinces, while other deserters, around 5,000 Doukhobors, were resettled in Georgia between 1841 and 1845 in the Tbilisi district.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it was. I'm actually not surprised by that because one of the oldest Jewish communities in the world exists in Georgia.
So Georgia has a history of tolerance.
We have the oldest Jewish synagogue in Georgia. It's in Georgia, and on the same street where this synagogue is built, we have a Sunni church, Sunni mosque, a Shiite mosque, a Catholic church, and a Christian church.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And none of the Eastern stuff, but like all the kind of those religions that are constantly fighting that area, they have the same with one of the oldest Jewish churches, and Georgian Jews, just kind of like we have a history of accepting. So when they were kicked out 2,600 years ago by the Babylonian king outside of Israel.
Yes.
And they were deserted. Georgia was one of the few countries that accepted them. And we have a really long history of accepting
people of different faiths.
Faiths, yeah. It kind of we have taught because the Christian religion is that we have to be tolerant. Obviously, we have to be very on guard all the time because we're surrounded by three great military powers: Iran, Turkey, and Russia, and then we have our own internal conflicts. So there's a lot of war in that area, but on the same hand, when Georgia converted into Christianity in the year 300, it like solidified this kind of we're trying to be neutral, but kind of have to fight. conditional pacifism.
Well, they certainly allowed the Doukhobors to settle there because this black and white photo that I've got showing was photographed around the year 1900. And you just read that about 70 years earlier was when the Tsar forced them to move into the Caucasus. So they had colonies of people living there for at least 70 years.
Oh, I see. So this is 70 years later when the initial...
Yeah, after the initial settlement. Yeah. No, it's fascinating. So Tolstoy, he just made himself available and helped people, in all different kind of conditions. So it wasn't the greatest for his family life. Here, some of his he had 13 kids. He and his wife had 13 kids. I think he was about 30 years older than her when they married, and even when they got old, he was still 30 years older. I don't know how that works, huh? Just like it stayed that way.
What, he was 30 years older than his wife?
Yeah, all the time. Something like that. Yeah.
Leo Tolstoy.
Yeah,
Okay.
Tolstoy was quite a bit older than his wife.
And how old was he when he got married?
I think she was about 17 or 18, so he must have been in his mid-40s or so.
And that's when he started having kids?
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
That's why some of his kids lived into the around 1970s, 1980s, somewhere around that time.
Yes,
Yep, some of his children. And you mentioned earlier that Tolstoy's children, he had 8 children who survived to adulthood, and they a lot of them moved. Some of them stayed in Russia and supported the socialism that took over in Russia because their father, Tolstoy, was in favor of socialism. And the communists treated Tolstoy's legacy really well. They allowed his estate and the house he was born in to stay as a state museum, which they didn't do for everybody who was wealthy. But they understood that, for one thing, he was a cultural
they got
icon.
rid of the Romanovs entire.
Yeah.
They erased.
They erased them.
Yeah. They were the head of the state.
So you don't think Alexandria escaped, like in some of the cartoon movies where she goes to France and
the Romanov?
And there's still like some descendants of the Romanov family is still around somewhere?
They're around. You know who they are?
Who?
It's the Queen Elizabeths. So
no, those were cousins.
They were
direct descendants, though.
Yeah, King George and Nicholas, they were cousins, and they look very alike.
Yeah.
But I did watch the little thing on, not because of this part. This was a while back.
Sure.
It was about the Romanovs, and they found their remaining remnants or whatever, and I think they all died.
Yeah, that's what they want you to believe. But I think in reality, there's
some of them escaped.
Yeah, they're living probably here in Calgary.
Really?
No, no.
Do you know something I don't know?
No, I sure don't. No, no. They all perished.
Which is very unfortunate. Well, I don't know how. I shouldn't say that.
It was a mess.
I don't
know. It was a
know,
mess.
yeah.
I mean, Rasputin came to live with the family, and he was a disaster.
That's another guy that we could do an episode on him. Does he do anything with bees?
No.
Okay.
Thankfully, not that I know of.
More pseudoscience.
No. And we're going to try to avoid pseudoscience here as much as we can. Sure, a little bit, but we'll put warnings on our podcast that may or may not be true. No, we try to keep on the up and up with this, and so Tolstoy's family,
they kept good care of him.
The communists took good care of his legacy. So he died in 1910, which is about 10 years before Lenin had complete control over Russia. And Lenin actually had a lot of good things to say about beekeepers. And beekeeping in one of the earliest laws that Lenin put in was that beekeepers would be allowed to run commercial businesses and not be taxed, because he thought that it was so essential to the economy and to the food production and so on, that they were basically exempt from a lot of the disastrous collectivization and rules and so on. Now, there were collective farms that had bees on them, unquestionably, that's true. But sometime we'll do a little bit more about that part of the Russian era. Today, the focus was on Tolstoy and about the fact that he had a very strange life, a very significant life. And War and Peace wasn't the only book that includes stories about bees. In the book Anna Karenina, that's a novel about basically Russian middle-class aristocracy, not the wealthiest of the Russians, not royalty, but very well-off landowners. And one of the key people in that book also kept bees. And was a person.
Was it Anna? Or I don't know the book, but who was
the beekeeper?
Well, the story, it's about a young lady,
yes,
who is kind of caught in a love triangle.
Yeah, she is of her own making. I mean, she was
right.
Yeah.
And so between who's the beekeeper between the three? The love triangle. It's her and there's two other guys.
Yeah, there was one of the guys who really liked her.
But he had other plans.
Well, yeah, that was the one she ended up marrying, I think. There was another one who was really, really fond of her, but decided that this was a mess, and he ended up having a really nice pastoral, countryside life
as a beekeeper,
as a farmer,
as a farmer.
But a very wealthy farmer, a landowner who had serfs working for him. You know what a serf is?
It's like a level above a peasant,
or maybe a level below a peasant.
Oh, okay.
Some of my ancestors were serfs. The word Slav was taken over in the English language as a way of referring to people who were owned by other people, slave. So the word slave comes from the word Slav. And the Slavs were bought and sold, until relatively recently in history. And
there's a big slave the economy in that area.
Well,
or
the
slave trade. Or
there was. There was. And then the people who were serfs were basically living as slaves with almost no rights. They couldn't own property. And they could survive by being allowed to keep a small part of the production off the property that they took care of.
If you're a peasant, you might be a landowner.
Yeah, or you could maybe move into the city.
Okay, I see.
And the serf couldn't leave. Serfs were stuck on their land until they were emancipated about the same time that the Americans freed enslaved people in the southern United States. So somewhere in the 1860s, maybe even a little later, 1870s, the serfs were granted rights of citizenship. But until then, the vast majority of people in Russia were serfs. They tend to be very badly treated by the landowners, and they owned almost nothing, and they were susceptible to starvation, and they had a really, really, really tough life. So anyhow, that's our story with Tolstoy, the beekeeper. Yes,
he had a very we can go for like a little bit more, but
yeah,
he had an interesting death.
Yeah, we should go into that. And
then maybe should we finish up a little Anna Karenina a little bit as well? Because apparently that's why it was such a great novel. I didn't read it, but the research that I did online was they were saying that even though is her name Anna?
Yeah.
So she was this naive young girl that kind of had everything set up for her, and all she had to do was wait for this perfect husband. Instead, she wanted to run off with this charming kind of narcissistic other guy that kind of that understood her situation and used it to his advantage. But if you look more deeper to that, the book kind of gives you a perspective of Anna Karenina, who was pretty much she was a young girl that, was looking for love, didn't know too much, and she was frustrated with this guy that was doing stuff that she didn't really think was important, more important than their relationship. So she decided to follow her heart and then get kind of duped by this guy, she didn't want to make anyone feel bad. So that guy kind of used it to her advantage. So it wasn't really her fault, and it was more of like the
tragedy.
Complexities of life, and if we can look through the eyes of other people, we can maybe understand. Like he was trying to, he allowed people to sympathize with the worst of humanity, kind of. I don't know if that makes...
That does. It's very well described. I read the book about a year ago, and I found it to be engaging, interesting, very descriptive, and a real window on a period of time, and a period of time when people had roles that they had to fill, and where the expectations were really higher than what a lot of people were capable of fulfilling. So it's a good story. It's I've read other things by Tolstoy, but that's the most recent that I read. War and Peace, quite a long time ago.
I see.
Yeah. So anyway, what are we going to do next time?
Should we just wrap it to kind of talk about his death a little bit?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah,
I
did want to come to that.
Just wrap it up.
And do you want to tell what you know about it?
Well, he was, I don't know, I guess he turned 80 and he's like, I've lived my fair share of life. And he was constantly having conflict with his family and his wife. It just got worse and worse as he aged. And eventually he got on a horse in the middle of winter in November and ran off in the middle of the night on his horse. And then they found him dead at a train stop where he was waiting for a train. And
that's pretty much not exactly where he died, but the story is the story is true. That's what I also saw, is that he and his wife never really got along very well.
Big age gap.
There's a big age gap there, but I don't know that certainly would contribute. Right. But anyhow, he ended up exactly what you said. He left without telling anybody where he was going to go. Yeah. He went to the train station. He got on a train. He got off at another train station, and the
he had pneumonia or something.
He had pneumonia and was taken off and taken to like an infirmary that was at that train station. And so he wasn't alone. It wasn't like he died on the horse or died as soon as he got to the train station. He was alive for a day or two.
Oh, I see.
Very sick.
They didn't find him dead.
No. Okay. They sent word to his wife. And they told him that his wife wanted to see him, and he said no. He said, no, I don't want to see her. So I don't think
that might kill me soon.
No,
let me enjoy my last minutes.
That's pretty tragic. I mean, they were together for almost 50 years.
Because he's going to die, and now she's going to have to live with that.
Yeah. So he did see his a couple of his kids that were living in the area. They came to see him before he passed away.
The kids came, but she didn't.
She went. I guess she was at the train station.
Oh no, never saw him.
Yeah, they never. Not until he was unconscious, just before he died, and then she went in, but he didn't know she was there. Yeah.
Wow, that is very tragic. Actually. Yeah. That's.
Yeah.
They should make a movie about him.
They did.
They did.
Yeah. It's called The Last Station.
So very fitting.
Yeah, there is a movie, and famous Canadian actor whom I won't be able to think of his name right now. No, I will. Christopher Plummer. Did I say that last name correctly? He was the star. He was
Christopher
Plummer.
Yeah.
Plummer. How do you spell that?
Plummer.
Okay, so it's Plummer, not Plumer. Plummer. Yeah.
Yeah, he was Lev. Or Leo
Yeah,
or Lev?
well, same name.
Okay, same name. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really good movie, too. It's a very good movie.
Ah, it's 2009. Yeah, this would be a really good movie.
It is. You should watch it.
Huh.
Yeah. And it tells that ending story. So anybody, maybe we can put some,
Images up?
something
okay.
up on that, too.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so join us next week for a topic of, do bees feel pain?
I don't know. Do they?
Well, I feel pain every time I get stung. And I don't know how the heck did they manage to release that amount of pain in that little sting.
You don't like getting stung?
I do. Okay, it hurts. It depends where I get stung.
Okay, that's
I
fair.
have fingertips.
That's fair.
My nose, for some reason, gets stung every single time. Even with my beekeeping suit, the screen touches it, they can nick it. Get stung in the ears a couple times. I didn't like that on the tips of the ears, but it hurt. So they must feel. They know what pain feels like if they're giving it. If they're dishing it out, they better. Yeah, they better take it.
Well, I actually have to say,
now I feel bad that they feel pain.
They do feel pain.
Yeah,
it's
I got to
true.
be more careful.
They do, and we're going to talk about a lot about that. What insects can feel, whether they
plants.
enjoy life.
Should we just talk about like these inanimate objects that people don't think feel, like grass? Like, does grass feel pain when we walk on it?
I don't know.
Should that be a whole topic? Kind of what bees.
What about when you mow grass?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either. Actually,
when you
don't
pick
know.
a leaf.
Yeah.
There must be some sort of nervous.
Something similar to nerves. That's certainly not a nervous system, but they have ways
system,
of sending alarm signals out to other plants, and like they do that.
Yeah, they do that. So they communicate. So there's some sort of consciousness. There's actually, that's a very. I don't want to kind of get on plants, but they say that the reason the Earth is warming and the reason why us humans are increasing the CO2 is actually we're a byproduct of plants. So the plants were here a lot before we were, and they prefer the Earth to be warmer, not colder. So they actually want the mammals and the living things on Earth to create more CO2 because they get bigger and better. And the warmer it is, the better for them. So we're actually the plants are our masters because they live a lot longer than us.
Well,
I don't know.
I can't.
Because if you just look at the Earth, right, it's green.
Yeah.
It's not.
Most
that book,
most of it's blue.
Most of it. And the book you gave me about ants.
Yeah.
The author says there. I forgot his.
E.O. Wilson.
Yeah, he says that if extraterrestrials were to come to Earth, they wouldn't call it the planet of humans. They would call it the planet of ants.
Yeah.
And I would call it the planet of leaves or plants. Like we're really we're a small product of this ecosystem that we live on. Very small compared to in ratio compared to the other things that are available. So who's the master of who,
Yeah, that's a really good point. I don't have an answer for that. I certainly don't know.
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe that can kind of fit into the whole topic of, do bees feel pain?
Yeah, So
I don't want to get too.
Meanwhile, thank you, everybody. This has been really great. And as usual, we wandered all over the planet with our stories. We will be back next time talking about the nervous system, the brain of insects, and particularly different kinds of bees. Bees have been trained to play football, just like David Beckham, and bees probably feel pain when they get injured. So we will be going into that as much detail as we can.
That's a real fact, right? That they were trained to play football?
Bumblebees.
Bumblebees,
yes.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
They look like a little soccer ball flying around sometimes.
Yeah. Well, they were trained that if they rolled a ball into a certain spot and it fell into a little hole, they would get a little treat of sugar water. And it didn't take them long to put it together that I got to roll that ball and get it in that little spot, and I'll get a treat.
Huh.
Yeah.
Bumblebees are fascinating, but they have a male dominant society, huh?
No.
No.
Why did you think that?
I don't know. I was trying to do research online. I was searching up like sex ratios between the bumblebee population. It's not male dominant. It's 75 to 25, right? 25% males and 75% females.
That might be. Yeah. Don't know for sure, actually, to be honest. I don't know what that ratio is, but I do know that that the earlier in the season, when the bumblebee nest is expanding, then it's dominated by females, by workers. So the queen starts it. She lays about 8 eggs in a cluster, all by herself, builds the first wax by herself, brings in food by herself to feed the first 8 larvae, and when they emerge, it takes about 21 days, just like honeybees, 21 days from the time the egg is laid before the adult bumblebees emerge from those little cells that the queen made, and then they are all female, and they will help her make the nest bigger. And then she can stay home and keep everything warm. They give off, that bees give off body heat by vibrating their muscles.
Right.
And that's true for the bumblebees too. Anyhow, that's a little different. That's another topic.
Right.
Yeah.
So join us next week and about do bees feel pain? And it's going to be all about bees, not just honeybees. So we're going to be talking about bumblebees, mason bees, and all other insects, and how do they feel about pain.
Yeah, and how do they feel about us?
Not how do they feel about pain. Do they feel pain?
We know. We know what you meant, and that's fantastic. Bidzina, this has been fun.
Yes.
Thank you, and thanks for everybody listening. We appreciate it. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.